I never thought I'd find myself in this position, writing about the demise of my marriage. My name is Michael, and I used to think I had it all figured out. I married Emily 5 years ago, and for a while everything seemed perfect. We had a cozy home in the suburbs of Chicago, 2 dogs, and dreams of starting a family. I thought I was living the American dream, but then things started to unravel. The first signs were subtle, almost insignificant. Emily began to change her routine. She was working late more often, claiming it was just a busy season at her job in marketing. I wanted to believe her, but something about her demeanor felt off. She became more distant, scrolling through her phone even when we were together, often lost in some private world that I wasn't part of. I brushed it off, telling myself I was being paranoid. It wasn't until one fateful Friday night that everything came crashing down. I had planned to surprise her with dinner at our favorite restaurant. I had made reservations and even picked up a bouquet of her favorite flowers, but when I got home, she wasn't there. I waited for over an hour, trying not to let my mind wander to terrible places. When she finally walked through the door, I could smell her perfume mixed with something else, something I couldn't quite place. I remember my heart racing as I tried to rationalize it away. Over the next few weeks, things continued to spiral. I found myself obsessively checking her social media, something I had never done before. One night I saw a series of pictures of her with another guy, laughing and looking too comfortable for my liking. They were at a bar downtown, and I recognized him as Mark, a guy from her office. My gut twisted, but I told myself it was innocent. Maybe they were just friends, just colleagues. I wanted to believe that, but every time I touched her arm or kissed her forehead, I felt the walls closing in. Then came the real kicker. One evening I was cleaning out the garage, and I stumbled upon an envelope hidden under a pile of old paint cans. It was addressed to Emily, but it wasn't from any of her friends or family. It was from a hotel, confirming a reservation for two. My heart sank as I ripped it open and read the details. The reservation was for a weekend away just 2 weeks prior, and the credit card used was not mine. It was a sinking feeling, the kind you read about but never expect to experience yourself. The moment I confronted her, everything hit the fan. I waited until she got home from work, trying to act nonchalant, but my insides were churning. I threw the envelope on the table and her face went pale. "What's this, Emily?" I asked, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. She stammered, trying to concoct some story about a work conference, but the words fell flat. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized I knew the truth. Her excuses were weak. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that she was just trying to have fun. I felt the betrayal clawing at my chest like a wild animal. I had given her my heart, my trust, and she had crushed it. The woman I once loved began to morph into a stranger, a person I couldn't recognize wrapped in lies. The confrontation ended in tears, but not the kind I had hoped for. Emily cried for herself, not for what she had done. As I sat there watching her fall apart, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. I was drowning in a sea of betrayal, unable to find my footing. I had to make a decision, and fast. I couldn't continue living like this, pretending everything was fine when it clearly was. How could I trust her again? Would I even want to? The shock began to settle into something deeper, something darker. What would happen next? I had no idea, but I knew that I wouldn't let this go unanswered. Little did I know, I was just at the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. The days following that fateful confrontation felt surreal. I didn't sleep much. I spent countless hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment with Emily, dissecting our life together like a crime scene. Every laugh, every loving glance now felt tainted by her betrayal. I was a mess, moving through my days like a ghost, haunted by the reality of what I had discovered. Emily tried to reach out, attempting to reestablish some semblance of normalcy. She would make coffee in the mornings and offer up small talk as though nothing had happened, but her attempts fell flat. I was a volcano, simmering just beneath the surface, and I would not be appeased by her casual gestures. I kept my distance, both physically and emotionally. I needed to think, to plan my next move. I began to gather evidence. I became a detective in my own life. I started keeping track of her schedule, noting when she left and when she returned. I even enlisted the help of a couple of friends who were more than willing to help me figure out what was going on. I could see the relief on their faces when I shared my suspicions, and they jumped in, ready to help me bring this situation to a head. One afternoon, I received a text from one of my friends, Jake, who worked in a nearby bar. "Just saw Emily here with Mark. They looked pretty cozy, man." The blood drained from my face. I knew I had to confront her again, but this time I would be ready. I couldn't let her control the narrative any longer. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal. When Emily got home that evening, I could tell she was in a good mood, laughing at something on her phone. I felt my heart race as the anger coursed through my veins. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. Her laughter faded and she straightened, sensing my tone. "What is it, Michael?" she asked, feigning innocence, but I could see through her act. "Don't play games with me, Emily." "I know you were at the bar with Mark today," I said, watching her expression shift from confusion to panic. "I have friends who saw you." She opened her mouth, ready to spill out another lie, but I cut her off. "No more excuses, I want the truth." That was when her facade cracked. The mask of guilt slipped away, replaced by anger. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I can't believe you're doing this." She raised her voice, the bitterness in her tone chilling me to the bone. "You're so paranoid. It's just a work friendship." I watched as she spiraled, trying to twist the narrative to make me the villain. "I should have known you react this way. You always overthink everything." It was infuriating. I had given her so many chances to come clean, but all I was getting in return was denial and deflection. "Overthink? You think this is me overthinking? Think about how you are making me feel." I shouted. I couldn't hold back the anger any longer. As her defenses crumbled, I saw hints of fear in her eyes. "Okay, fine, I was with him, but it was nothing serious," she exclaimed. "You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped in a relationship. I wanted to feel alive again." Her words cut deeper than any knife. Trapped. I had given her everything, a home, my love, my trust. "You chose to betray me, Emily. You had options. You could have talked to me. You didn't have to go sleeping with someone else." Her response was a weak apology, but I could see it was just a half-hearted attempt to salvage her image. I felt my heart hardening, the love I once felt evaporating into resentment. In that moment, I made a decision. I would not let her walk away unscathed. I needed revenge, not just for me, but to reclaim my self-worth. I didn't want to be the pushover husband who forgave and forgot. I would ensure that she understood the consequences of her actions. It was time to turn the tables. I started to think of a plan, something that would make her realize how trivial she had made my last name. I would make sure that if she tried to remarry or move on with her life, my name wouldn't carry the same weight it once did. I wanted her to feel the full impact of what she had done. It was time for Emily to face what happens when trust is shattered. I didn't know exactly what I would do yet, but I knew one thing for sure: this wouldn't end quietly. I was done being the victim. I was ready for a reckoning. With a new fire in my heart, I began to formulate my plan. The initial shock and hurt were still there, but they morphed into a cold determination. Emily's betrayal had stripped away the love I had for her and replaced it with a need for retribution. I wanted her to understand that my name, my identity, was not something she could carelessly tarnish and then walk away from without consequences. The first step in my plan involved gathering more evidence. I needed to paint a clear picture of her infidelity, not just for myself, but for anyone else who might be affected by her lies. I started by documenting every suspicious behavior, every late-night text, and every moment she spent away from home that seemed too long. I even reached out to a few people from her past, old friends she had drifted away from, searching for any connections that might shed light on her current relationship with Mark. I also hacked into her social media accounts. It's not something I'm proud of, but I felt justified. I needed to see the extent of her betrayal and gather proof that would make it impossible for her to manipulate the truth. As I scrolled through her messages, my heart raced. There were flirty exchanges, inside jokes, and plans that clearly left me out. It sickened me to read the words she had written to him, sweet nothings that should have been reserved for me. One night, as I sat on the couch in the dark, I found a message where Emily invited Mark over while I was away on a business trip. That was it, the final straw. I felt a surge of adrenaline, the kind that made my heart pound. I could no longer sit idly by. I had to act. I decided to confront her once more, but this time I would have evidence in hand. I wanted her to see that I wasn't just making accusations out of jealousy. I was armed with facts. I waited until she got home from her yoga class, her face flushed from exercise. I could tell that she thought she could walk in and charm her way out of any confrontation, but I was ready. "Emily," I called, my voice steady, "we need to talk." She froze in the doorway, a look of trepidation crossing her face. "What is it now, Michael?" she asked, her tone sharp. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, opening the messages I had screen captured. "I have something you need to see." I handed her the phone, watching as she scrolled through the conversations between her and Mark. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, and finally to anger. "How could you go through my phone?" she shouted, her voice rising, but I didn't flinch. "Your betrayal left me with no choice," I replied, my voice calm despite the storm inside me. "You don't get to play innocent anymore. You've been lying to me for months." She shook her head, trying to defend herself. "You don't understand. It was just fun. You've been so distant. It felt good to feel wanted again." I felt the heat of anger rising again, but I forced it down. "Fun? That what you call it? You think it's okay to betray someone you claim to love?" I took a step closer, making sure she understood the gravity of what she had done. "Michael, she faltered, her bravado fading. But I saw no remorse, just desperation. I was not going to let her manipulate me again. I pressed on. "I'm done with your excuses. You took my trust and threw it out the window. You don't get to keep my name just because you're too afraid to face the consequences of your actions." I could see her mind racing, trying to craft yet another lie. "I didn't mean for it to happen. I thought you would understand." "Understand? What's to understand? That you could have your cake and eat it too." I cut her off, feeling the tide of emotion ebb and flow. "I'm not going to be your backup plan. If you think Mark is worth it, then go to him. But don't think for a second that I'll let you keep my name and live a happy life without addressing this." I could see the realization dawning on her face. She knew I was serious, and for the first time I felt like I had control over the situation. I had finally shifted the power dynamic that had been skewed in her favor for too long. "Michael, please," she pleaded, her voice shaky. "I can fix this. We can work on it." But I wasn't interested in fixing anything. I was interested in making sure she understood the weight of her betrayal. "You can keep your little affair if that's what you want, but I won't stay married to someone who thinks this is acceptable behavior. I'm done." With that, I turned away, leaving her standing there, dumbfounded. I needed to think about my next move and how to make sure my name held no meaning for her anymore. It was time to enact the plan that had been simmering in my mind ever since I discovered the truth. I would ensure that Emily knew the value of what she had lost, and I was going to make it hurt. Once I made the decision to go through with my plan, everything fell into place quickly. The mix of adrenaline and anger fueled my actions. I spent the next few days laying the groundwork for what was to come. I knew that I had to strike while the iron was hot. Her betrayal was still fresh, and my resolve was unshakable. I started by contacting a lawyer. I didn't want to jump into divorce proceedings blindly, so I gathered information on my rights and options. I wanted to ensure that I had a strong case, especially since Emily would try to twist things in her favor. It was surprisingly empowering to talk to someone who understood my situation. She listened intently as I recounted everything, and the lawyer assured me that I had plenty of evidence to support my claims. "Just keep documenting everything," she advised. "You're in a good position to protect yourself and your assets." I also began to establish a timeline of Emily's infidelity. I dug deep into social media, taking screenshots of her interactions with Mark and noting the dates of her late nights and text messages. I even created a folder on my computer labeled Evidence, a harmless name that belied the emotional weight it held. Every time I added to it, I felt a sense of satisfaction, like I was reclaiming pieces of my dignity. Tensions at home were palpable. Emily tried to engage me in conversations about our future, suggesting couples therapy and other ways to fix our marriage. But every time she brought it up, I felt my resolve strengthen. I had no intention of going back to the way things were. I wanted to make sure she understood that her actions had consequences, and I would not be her punchline. As the weeks passed, I set my sights on the ultimate goal, her upcoming birthday. Emily had expressed wanting a big celebration, and I saw this as my opportunity to truly make my point. I decided to throw her a party, but it wouldn't be the kind of celebration she envisioned. I wanted to make it unforgettable, one that would expose her to her friends and family for who she really was. I spent hours planning every detail. I invited her closest friends and family, all while keeping it under wraps to ensure that Emily had no idea what was coming. I even reached out to some of her old friends who had distanced themselves after her marriage to me. I wanted them to see the truth, to know that she had been living a double life. On the day of the party, I acted as normal as possible. I presented Emily with a beautifully wrapped gift in the morning, a gesture of goodwill to mask my true intentions. She was thrilled, her excitement palpable as she unwrapped a new smartwatch. I couldn't help but notice how blissfully unaware she was, completely oblivious to the storm that was brewing beneath the surface. As her friends arrived that evening, the atmosphere buzzed with laughter and conversation. I played the gracious host, pouring drinks and engaging in light banter. It felt good to see her happy, but it was all part of a larger plan. I waited until everyone had settled in, and then I made my move. With everyone gathered in the living room, I stood up and tapped my glass to get their attention. Thank you all for coming to celebrate Emily's birthday. I have something I want to share that's a little different than typical birthday wishes. The room fell silent. I could see Emily's expression shift from confusion to concern. She shot me a look, warning me to back off, but I pressed on, determined to expose her truth. As many of you know, Emily and I have been married for 5 years. I loved her deeply, but I recently discovered that she has been unfaithful to me. Gasps filled the room as I continued. I have evidence of her relationship with Mark, which I've documented over the last few months. I thought it was only fair that you all should know who you're celebrating tonight. Emily's face turned crimson as she tried to interject, but I held my hand up to silence her. I'm not here to discuss feelings tonight. I'm here to give you all the truth. I played the messages on my phone, letting her friends read the flirty exchanges, the plans for secret rendezvous, and all the lies she had spun to cover her tracks. The room was filled with shocked expressions as they processed the gravity of what I was revealing. Emily's friends looked uncomfortable, glancing at her in disbelief as she tried to defend herself. "Michael, this isn't fair," she shouted, her voice cracking. "You're ruining my birthday." "No, Emily," I said firmly. "You ruined your birthday. You made choices, and now it's time for you to face the consequences in front of the people you claim to care about." The weight of the moment hung in the air as I watched the reality sink in. Her friends began to look at her differently, some even taking a step back as if distancing themselves from the situation. I felt a surge of triumph. This was the moment I had envisioned, a chance to expose the truth and watch her world crumble. And in that instant, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I had taken back my power, and the woman who had once held my heart in her hands was now standing before me, stripped of her facade. I knew there would be fallout from this, but I was ready to face it. Emily had made her choice, and now she would understand the true meaning of betrayal. As the stunned silence enveloped the room, I could see the realization wash over Emily's friends. The shock turned into whispers, and I felt a mix of satisfaction and liberation. I had exposed her betrayal, and now the consequences were unfolding before my eyes. Emily's expression shifted from anger to desperation as she pleaded with her friends. "You all know me. This isn't who I am. I made a mistake." But the more she protested, the more the truth settled in. There was no escaping the reality I had laid bare. I could see her walls crumbling as the people she had once held close turned their backs on her. "I can't believe you would do this to me," she hissed, her voice low and filled with venom. I was taken aback for a moment. I had expected tears, remorse, or even a heartfelt apology, but here she was, still trying to paint herself as the victim. "It's not about me, Emily," I responded, my voice firm. "This is about your choices. You made a decision to betray our marriage, and now it's time to face the music." The atmosphere in the room changed dramatically. Friends who once stood by her side now looked at her with a mix of pity and disappointment. Her best friend, Sarah, shook her head in disbelief. "Emily, I never thought you were capable of this. Why didn't you come to us?" Emily turned her gaze away, knowing she had lost their support. The reality of her situation sunk deeper as she realized that her web of lies had finally unraveled. I watched as the shame washed over her, an emotion she had skillfully avoided until now. As the guests began to filter out, their chatter filled with disbelief and gossip about the night's events, I felt a sense of closure wash over me. I had done what I set out to do, but part of me wondered how Emily would react moving forward. Would she try to salvage any relationships after this? Would she come crawling back to me? When the last of her friends left, I turned to her. The anger had faded from her eyes, replaced with a glimmer of fear and defeat. "What have you done, Michael?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've shown you what happens when you betray someone who loves you," I replied, my tone steady. "You can't keep pretending that everything is fine. This isn't just about us anymore. You've hurt too many people with your lies." Emily's shoulders slumped as she dropped her gaze to the floor. For the first time, I could see a flicker of regret in her eyes. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could have both." "That's the problem," I said, feeling the veil of anger begin to lift. "You thought you could keep living a double life without consequences. But here we are, and you have to live with the truth now." I felt a pang of sadness for what used to be, but I also felt empowered. I would not be the victim in this narrative. As the evening wore on, I made it clear that I was not interested in talking about reconciliation. I needed time to process everything before making any decisions about our future. "I think it's best if we take a step back," I said firmly. "I can't be around you right now. I need space to figure out my next steps." Emily nodded, the fight leaving her as she understood the gravity of her situation. I left her standing in the dimly lit living room, surrounded by remnants of what once was, party decorations that now seemed like a cruel joke. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I felt liberated, angry, sad, and confused all at once. I began to focus on myself, reconnecting with friends I had neglected during our marriage. They supported me wholeheartedly, and I found solace in their company. I started going to the gym, taking care of my mental and physical health, and rediscovering who I was beyond the confines of my failed marriage. Emily attempted to reach out, sending texts filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness, but I didn't respond. I had made a promise to myself that I would not fall back into her trap. I was on a journey of self-discovery, and there was no room for her manipulation. In the weeks that followed, I met with my lawyer again. We discussed the next steps for divorce proceedings. It felt surreal, sitting in that office, contemplating the end of a chapter I once thought would last a lifetime. Yet I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I was taking control of my life again, free from the emotional turmoil that had weighed me down for so long. I realized that this experience had taught me valuable lessons about trust, love, and the importance of self-respect. I vowed never to allow someone to treat me like this again. In the face of betrayal, I had found my strength and emerged ready to embrace a new beginning. As I prepared to file for divorce, I felt a sense of closure, knowing that I was finally taking the steps I needed to move forward. I was ready to reclaim my name, my identity, and my future. The day I filed for divorce was both daunting and liberating. I walked into the courthouse with a sense of purpose, the weight of my past firmly behind me. I had spent weeks gathering all the necessary documents, from financial records to evidence of Emily's infidelity. I was ready to make it official, to close the door on a chapter that had once felt so promising but had turned into a nightmare. As I sat in the waiting area, I took a moment to reflect. It was surreal to think about how far I had come. The man sitting there was not the same person who had discovered Emily's betrayal months earlier. I had grown stronger, more resolute, and more aware of what I would and would not accept in a relationship. I had learned that love does not equate to blind trust. It requires mutual respect and honesty. After what felt like an eternity, my name was called. I walked into the courtroom, and as I took the stand, I felt a wave of determination wash over me. The judge was kind but firm, and as I recounted the events that led to this moment, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I wasn't just here to end a marriage, I was reclaiming my narrative. The judge listened attentively, and when I finished, she nodded, understanding the gravity of my situation. "It sounds like you have given this a lot of thought," she said. "Is it your wish to proceed with the divorce?" I nodded firmly. "Yes, Your Honor, I believe it's the best choice for both of us." As the judge granted the divorce, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. It was finally over. The relationship that had once brought me joy and love had disintegrated into something toxic. I was free, but I was also left with scars that would take time to heal. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I immersed myself in work, picking up extra hours and even taking on a few side projects. I found comfort in my routine, and my friends were more supportive than I could have imagined. They rallied around me, offering their company and understanding as I navigated my newfound freedom. Emily continued to reach out, sending messages filled with regrets and pleas for another chance. I struggled with the decision of whether or not to respond. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to remind her of the pain she had caused. But I also knew that my silence was powerful. It signified that I was moving on, that I was no longer interested in the games we had played. Eventually, I decided to respond. I wrote a letter, pouring my heart into every word. I told her that while I appreciated the memories we shared, I could not return to a relationship built on lies. I needed to prioritize my own well-being and happiness now. I wished her the best but made it clear that I would not be a part of her life moving forward. As the months passed, I began to rediscover who I was. I took up new hobbies, something I always wanted to do but had put off during our marriage. I started hiking on weekends, exploring the beautiful trails around Chicago and finding solace in nature. Each step I took on those trails felt like another step toward healing. I was learning to love myself again, and the process was liberating. Eventually, I found myself meeting new people. I started dating again, cautiously at first, but my heart began to open up once more. I met a woman named Sarah at a group hiking event. We clicked immediately, bonding over our love for the outdoors and our shared experiences. As we spent more time together, I found myself genuinely laughing and enjoying life again. Through this journey, I learned valuable lessons. I learned that trust is fragile and should never be taken lightly. I learned that self-respect is paramount. Most importantly, I learned that I deserved love that was genuine, honest, and unconditional. As I sat down to write this final part of my story, I reflect on how far I've come. I am no longer the man who was betrayed. I am a survivor, someone who has faced the darkness and emerged into the light. I have learned to stand tall, to embrace life, and to cherish the relationships that uplift me. To anyone reading this who finds themselves in a similar situation, know that it's possible to heal and move forward. It won't be easy, but you deserve to be treated with love and respect. Don't settle for anything less than what you deserve. Life is too precious to waste on those who don't appreciate it. As I close this chapter, I feel hopeful about what lies ahead. The future is bright, and I am ready to embrace it.